Okay, so I'm going to talk about two-dimensional arrays. So let's get started. When you declare an array, you give the data type, which in this case is going to be an integer. You name it, which I'm going to name it AR. And when you declare an integer array, you usually just give it the number of integers that you would like to have in your array. Well, when you're dealing with a two-dimensional array, you have to give it two integers. The first one is going to be the number of rows. So that's going to be the number of rows. And the second one is going to be the number of columns. So what I have here is an integer array called AR that has 4 rows and 3 columns. So I will draw a picture of what this looks like. So the array here, this represents the rows. So this is row 0, row 1, row 2, and row 3. So I have 4 rows, and each of these rows is made up of 3 columns. So this is column 0, 1, 2, and row 1 has 3 columns, 0, 1, 2. Row 2 has 3 columns, and row 3 has 3 columns. So if you take a look at this, you can see that basically what I've done here is I've drawn an array of arrays. And if you want to picture it a different way, you can make a table. So this would be the rows, 3 rows. And 3 columns. So I have 4 rows and 3 columns. All right, so if I were to, let's see if I can get a different color here. I'm not really sure how to pick a new color. There it is. All right, so let's pick a color green here. So if I were to put a number, say right here, a number 16 at this location, and I would put a number here like 21, and a number 6 here, and a number 2 here. So I put some information in here. So all you would do then is say which row. So this is at row 0, column 1. So at row 0, column 1, that would be a 6. And if this is row 1, column 0, that would be a 21. And the way that you would assign that is you would just, so let's assign this one right here. We would say AR at row 2, column 2 equals 16. So what you would do then is you would just go to row 2, column 2, and assign a 16 here. And just like with any other kind of array, when you declare an array of integers, any item within that array is an integer. So anything that I can do with an integer, I can do with any one of my items in my array that is at a particular row and column location. So the data type of this right here is an integer. So I can scan into, of course I put numbers here. So say row 3, column 0. So I could scan into it with %d with an ampersand. I could print it to the screen with %d without an ampersand, just with printf. Or I could assign it a value, or I could do math with it, or I could do anything, because AR at a particular row and a particular column, then that is an integer. So if I go here to row 3, column 0, I have row 3, column 0, I have assigned a 2 here. All right, so let's go to the next slide and talk about how you would, if you wanted to fill your array with information. So say you wanted to use scanf to fill your array. Now remember that our array is called AR. So if I wanted to fill my array, what you do is you use let's redeclare our array. So it has 4 rows and it has 3 columns. And we're going to fill this array with user input. So we're going to have two variables. I'm going to use I and K. And so basically what you do is you just make a nested loop. This for I equals 0, I less than the number of rows, which in this case is 4, I plus plus, and then inside that I'm going to nest a different loop inside that to represent the columns. For I equals 0, I less than 3, which is the number of columns, I plus plus, and then I have to prompt printf, enter, scanf. The data type is integer, and integer you use an ampersand, and it's going to be AR at a particular row, which is I, and a particular column, which is K. And what I did here is I made a little bit of a mistake, and I have to change these I's to K's. So hopefully you kept watching the video long enough to realize that I made a mistake here. So now, if you take a look at it, if here is my array, we'll just start from the beginning here. And this is row 0, and inside of row 0, I have column 0, column 1, and column 2. So let's get a new color. Back to white. All right, so the first, when I start out, I'm on row 0, so I'm in my row 0, and then is 0 less than 4? Yes, it is. So I go in here, and then I'm on, the first time I'm on column 0, so I'm on row 0, column 0. Is 0 less than 3? Yes, it is. I enter, and I would enter into 0, 0. So the first number the user entered would go here. Say it's 6. Then K is going to change, so I have I is 0 and K is 0. And then K is going to change to a 1. But I is still going to remain a 0 because this is, you do the inner loop first. So I check, is 1 less than 3? Yes, it is. So now I'm going to enter into 0, 1. And the user enters the number 8. So you can see you're going to nest through in here for 0, 1, 2, and then the next time you're going to move up to row 1 and then start to do 0, 1, 2 in that row. So I hope this helps to explain 2D arrays, and in a moment we're going to go over and read some code about 2D arrays. All right, so here we are in Visual Studio, and I'm just going to take a look at this code. This, what I've done here is I've declared the size of a size for the number of rows and a size for the number of columns. So when I declare, it's going to have 10 rows and 4 columns. So as I come down here, I have a few functions. My first function fills an array, and it takes an array as an argument, and it takes a pointer to the number of rows, because if you remember, the number of rows, we could use a partially filled array for the number of rows, but you cannot partially declare the number of columns because each row is full of those columns. So if you have 10 rows, each with 4 columns, then you need to know how many columns there are because you need to know how to get from one row to the next. And this is a function that prints the array, has the number of rows, so it's a partially filled array, a partially filled 2D array, and this searches an array. What this does is it takes an array of characters, the number of rows that are filled with that character, and a target character, the number of rows that have characters in it, and a target character, and it searches for that target, and it returns a -1 if the target is not found, and it returns, otherwise it returns the index of the row where that target is. So, and this prints the result. So we'll just take a look here again, just to refresh. This is how you declare an array, a two-dimensional array, the number of rows and the number of columns. This is a variable for the number of rows because this will be a partially filled array. This is a variable to indicate if the target was found, and this is a variable for the target. So this is the fill array function, print array function. This is the function call to searching the array, which takes the array, the number of rows, and the target, which is an A, and this prints if the A has been found. So this is another search the array. In this case, instead of searching for a literal A, in this case, you're going to ask the user to give you a target, and then you're going to see if that target is in there. All right, so here's how you fill in the array. You're going to ask the user how many rows they would like to put in the array. Again, the number, just like we've used partially filled arrays before, the number of rows indicates is the outer part of the array, and each row is made up of the same number of columns, and each row must be made of the same number of columns because essentially this is an array of arrays. So this will fill the array. You ask the user how many rows they want to put, up to 10 because you've declared it to be up to 10, and then you fill in character by character. This is the function that prints it. It takes the outer loop is the number of rows, the inner loop is the number of columns, and it prints one by one onto the screen, row, column. And this is the function to search the array, which takes the number of rows and the target, and it searches and it checks. So at first it searches 0, 0, then 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, then it changes to 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And if it finds the target, it will return the row where the target is located. And this is just a feedback information to tell the user if the row has been found.